hit it now, all right?
Good.
Good morning and welcome to Coffee with MDIFW. My name is Katie Yates and I'm a public relations specialist for the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. Coffee with MDIFW is a monthly series where I'll be meeting with different staff from our department to chat about recreation, management, and conservation over some coffee. Today I am catching up with Colonel Dan Scott to talk about safety reminders for 2021, the Warden Service hiring process, and what's rewarding about being a game warden. For those of you watching at home, you can join the conversation anytime by typing in the chat box with your questions and comments, and we will answer questions as time allows. We do have a lot to cover, so I can't promise we'll get to every question. And just as a reminder, this video is recorded and it will be available at any time on the department's YouTube channel. I do see lots of people saying hello to Dan, so we'll just get started. Dan, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, Katie. It's good to see you this morning, and hello to everyone out there who's tuning in. I am on the road today, so I'm joining you from our Darrell Gordon Memorial Training Room at the Maine Criminal Justice Academy. It is good to see that we're definitely making some ice this morning, and some snow is in the forecast for later on this week. So potentially there'll be even more opportunities to get out and enjoy the Maine outdoors here in the next few days.
Yeah, hopefully. It's nice and cold today. So before we get started, why don't you tell everyone about yourself and your position with the department?
Sure. So I got my education at the University of Maine at Orono. My background is in forest engineering and wildlife management. Before being hired with the state of Maine, I worked for a short period of time with the Maine commercial forest industry. And in 1997, I got hired with the Warden Service and IFW. My first assignment was in the southern Penobscot County area as a district game warden over into Hancock County along the Penobscot River. I worked in that area for about 8 years until I took a job as an investigator out of our Greenville region. I worked up out of the Greenville region for a few years and then took over management of our special investigations division, personnel investigations, training, and other special services out of our Augusta office for about 5 years. The last 8 years, I spent back in Bangor as one of our division lieutenant supervisors, which covered Penobscot County, Hancock County, and Washington County. And then just over a year ago, I was asked to come back to Augusta as the colonel, and so here I am. I live just outside of Bangor with my wife and 4 kids, and pre-COVID spent much of my time, like many of you, running around to soccer, basketball, various sports, tennis. A lot of that has come to a standstill at this point, and so we spend most of our time enjoying the outdoors, doing some trapping, hunting, fishing, and camping in the North Woods.
Thank you so much for that. So the governor and our commissioner are often encouraging Mainers to go outside. Many Mainers are enjoying snowmobiling, ice fishing, and other winter rec opportunities, especially now that we have some snow. What are some safety considerations for them to keep in mind?
Sure. So obviously it's winter time, so we'll talk a little bit about snowmobiling. We've already, this has been kind of a difficult year because of the lack of snow, and obviously it was very warm early on and the lack of ice in many areas. So the conditions across the state kind of vary a little bit. There's some places with no riding at all right now. There's virtually no snow, and other places in the western mountains and up north where there is a little bit of snow. And I know the clubs are out doing their best to get the trails in good rideable conditions, but we really are lacking some snow that we would typically have this time of year. So we try to encourage people to slow down and watch out for hazards that may not typically be there. The melting snow can cause stumps or rocks or icy conditions that you otherwise may not expect. We have a lot of different safety messages we put out, but it's really pretty simple. You just need to slow down. We investigate a number of crashes every year. We already had a few fairly catastrophic incidents already this year. And the one common denominator in all of those is speed. Speed is really your enemy when you're Snowmobiles don't really give much cushion when you go off into the woods, and that's typically the incidents that we look into are people leave the trail for some reason. Either they're operating beyond their means, or they came upon an obstruction in the trail that they didn't expect, or obviously drinking and riding is not something that is very smart either. So just if people just have a consideration for other folks on the trail, remember that a lot of the trails are multi-use. So you may be on a snowmobile and expect to see other snowmobilers, but you may come around a corner and there may be cross-country skiers there, dog sledders, snowshoers, just people out walking. So don't drive beyond your means and don't drive beyond your headlights, so to speak, and just be conscious of your limitations. In addition to that, some of the other things that we ask snowmobilers to look out for, just to kind of stay out of trouble with our staff, is there's really no reason not to register your snowmobile now. We're well into winter. You can go to your town office, or really even the easier way is online registration is very easy and very efficient now. Please stay on the marked trails and stay off the roads. Keep in mind that when you're snowmobiling, probably more than 90 or 95% of the time that you're riding, you're on somebody else's land, somebody's private land, and somebody owns that and maintains it and has paid for it and pays taxes on it. And they're really working closely with the clubs and in cooperation with the state to offer you the privilege to be on their land. So here in Maine, we really rely on our private landowners to allow all the good outdoor recreation that we have. So we would encourage you to stay on marked trails and respect the rights of landowners.
And what about ice fishing now that we have some ice over this year? What are some considerations for people to keep in mind there?
Sure. Just like riding, it's been a kind of an interesting year. Early on, fishing is typically pretty good early in January, so people are anxious to get out. This year, it was one of the warmest years we've seen as far as temperatures and as far as ice. Even up in the northern part of the county, we had completely open lakes and ponds the first couple of weeks of January. In the southern part of the state where we allow it, there actually was probably as much open water fishing out of boats as there was ice fishing. Ice fishermen were kind of sticking to the coves where there was some ice. A few people talked about venturing out a little bit, and they rapidly saw the amount of ice decrease, and they did the right thing and turned around and fished closer to shore. However, the last week or so, ice conditions improve across the state. We're definitely making some ice last night and today and in the next few days. So we do encourage people to get out, still check the conditions, tell somebody where you're going and when you plan to be back. You don't need a big fancy ice auger. You can use an ice chisel and go out to check conditions as you venture your way out onto lakes and ponds and beaver flowages. If you do find yourself, finding 8, 9, or 10 inches of ice, and you go a little further and it's a little bit less, and you go a little further and it's even less, that's a good indicator to turn around and head back from the way you came. The local knowledge is always a good way to check as well. Talk with local snowmobile clubs, local store owners, or other fishermen who've been out, and just get an idea. Just because you see somebody out on the ice doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe all around, and you want to watch for places with moving water or pressure ridges, and just be extra cautious.
And I will just put a little plug in here. We do have a new ice fishing guide that is on our website, and we'll post a link for that in our comments. It's a really beautiful guide. It's really helpful and user-friendly. So if you're new to ice fishing or you're just looking to get started, that's a good place to start with some great information. So moving on, Dan, I have to ask, what have been some challenges with COVID-19 in Warden Service?
Sure. We have had a number of them. And you did remind me of one thing real quick, Katie. The other thing I'll point out, we also have online an app called our Float app, which is our fishing laws online angling tool. And it's an application you can put onto your smartphone that allows you to do interactive rule searching with a color map, and you can select the body of water that you're looking for. Click on it and it will tell you all about the laws and rules on that specific body of water. So that's very helpful to have. Once it's on your phone, you can also download the PDF of our fishing laws, and you don't even need connectivity to check those out. So that is a good reminder for folks who want to get out there, and there's directions on our website on how to get both of those apps. As far as COVID goes, like anything else, it's been challenging. It's exhausting. Trying to, I'll try to avoid that question because we just try to avoid 2020 altogether. But I think of the way COVID has affected us and kind of in two different ways. One is externally and one is internally. So early on in April and May, when the pandemic first struck, everybody was inside, kids were out of school. It was really unprecedented. Daycares were closing and people were in a situation that they had never been in the past. I think we take a little bit of it for granted now because virtual learning like this or interaction has kind of become a little bit normal for us, unfortunately. But if you remember back to April and May, that wasn't the case. And a lot of people were struggling with being at home and homeschooling and so forth. So as an agency, we really did everything we could to help the people get outside and get people out of their homes. And so that kind of that little bit of uncertainty and anxiety around the pandemic, we could maybe be a solution to that. So we pushed people to the outdoors where I&E folks really advertised a lot of outdoor opportunities. In April, we actually lifted the requirement to have a fishing license in order to encourage parents to get out with their kids and maybe do some open water fishing. Similarly, while we ramped up our online registration process and also worked with some of our registration agents and town offices, we lifted the boat registration requirement for the month of April and into May. So we tried to really facilitate folks being able to get outside and enjoy the outdoors without having to worry about too much regulation. During that same time was turkey season. We wanted to make sure that our registration agents, as well as the sporting public, were safe, and we lifted the requirement to have in-person turkey registrations. We lifted the turkey registration process for the springtime only last year, but that was an effort to really try to facilitate the safe operations of the stores where they tag the birds, and we wanted to make sure that that we weren't putting hunters into too much close contact with our registration agents. So many kind of external outreach type things we did as well. One good thing that really came out of the pandemic in our agency is it forced us to look at our online hunter education classes. Up to that point, we had a hybrid online system where you could take some of the class online and some of the class in person. 30 other states this summer had already started an online hunter education system. So we followed suit with them, and we now have a 100% online hunter ed program. We had never gone down that route before. Now that we're, however far through the pandemic, all 50 states have adopted that system. We have quickly realized that there were definitely a cohort of folks that really appreciated that and really wanted that opportunity because the first 4 months we had it up and running. We actually had more than 7,000 people log on and take either online hunter ed or bow hunter education. So that was a positive aspect and a positive outcome. Early on in the summer, we also had to deal with the industries we regulate, the guiding industry, the whitewater rafting industry. We worked with representatives from both of those industries to come up with guidelines so that they could continue their businesses through the summer and know how to safely recreate during the pandemic and within the guidelines of the state while guides were taking sports out, fishing or boating, and the whitewater industry was trying to operate on our rapidly flowing rivers. So that's kind of externally, that's our service to the public. Real quickly, internally, you can imagine we're a medium-sized agency, but as the pandemic started, we had cadets in the basic law enforcement training program here at the Academy. That went completely virtual. So we imagine trying to educate law enforcement officers in a virtual environment when we really never experienced that before. So that was a bit of a challenge for us. And immediately following that, we put our cadets through a 14-week advanced warden school, and we had to completely change that curriculum so we could do so in a virtual environment as well. Other than that, our field operations, we've tried to work with our staff to give them pointers and help them work with the public so we could continue with our mission and ensure that the fish and wildlife resources are protected. We wanted to continue with our regulatory inspections, but not endanger the public or our staff at all, and kind of keep our distance, maintain social distance when we're interacting with the sporting public. There was a much more high density of users out there, and we just really were out there trying to balance any types of conflicts that came of that. Many years ago, face coverings and hand sanitizer weren't part of the game warden's toolbox, but now they are a permanent fixture in our center consoles. So.
And we've certainly seen a lot of increased use on the landscape, more cars at trailheads and more people fishing and recreating than ever before, since there's not a whole lot to do except go outside. And that kind of reminds me that the Office of Tourism is educating land users to preserve Maine's resources and recreation opportunities. And we're going to post a link to that in the comments. And I'm just curious, Dan, what are your thoughts on how busy the outdoors have been recently?
So it doesn't take anybody very long to realize that they were extremely busy. And one function of pushing people to the outdoors to kind of enjoy the rejuvenating or the refreshing healing power of the outdoors is there were many more users out there. Anybody who tried to purchase an ATV or a watercraft last summer, you saw that the dealers were more or less out of their inventory. Well, all of those vehicles were now out on the landscape. Additionally, hikers, people started to take up hiking. You saw a lot of social media pushing local hikes or areas where you could go to get into various locations, and people were out looking for something to do in the outdoors. So we definitely saw a very much increased use, especially on our waterways. As you mentioned, the bottleneck there is very often public boat launches. Parking was a little bit of an issue. Sometimes getting a boat launched or back on your trailer can be an anxious situation for many people. So there's some stress levels rise there. And then once you are out in the body of water, the congested use leads to more reckless operation type complaints for our staff, headway speed complaints. Camp owners saw a marked increase in the use on their lakes that they weren't used to in the past. And so that generates complaints for our staff. In addition to that, all-terrain vehicles, ATVs, were busy on the landscape as well. And similar to snowmobiles, that puts additional pressure on our trail system and on our private landowners who allow the use of ATVs. So our staff was out trying to, reduce the number of conflicts and respond to crashes and complaints that came in regarding the increase of outdoor recreational use. One of the other phenomena we saw early on where a lot of people took to the trails and started hiking and trying to get out and see new areas. And if you remember back in April or May, last year was also another low snow year. And in April, down on the coast and the mid coast and down in southern Maine, we had some pretty nice days. It was starting to warm up a little bit. People wanted to get outside, and there were many people from the southern and eastern Maine area that went towards western and northern Maine to recreate. Well, you didn't need to get very far into the western mountains over north of Rumford and that area, or up towards Moosehead Lake, where conditions changed dramatically. And we did have some folks who really weren't prepared to be on the trailheads that they were at. And some of our rescues, broken bones, falling on slippery, icy covered trails increased, and our staff responded to certain areas a number of times last year, more so than normal, to do carry outs and help people get out who got themselves not necessarily lost, but into positions that they couldn't get themselves out of because the conditions across the state were quite a bit different. So increased outdoor use definitely means increased calls for service for the Maine Warden Service.
And this is actually a perfect time to segue into our next question. There are so many comments coming in right now about game warden positions and how people can become game wardens. So as outdoor pressure grows, I know there's going to be more of a need for game wardens out on the landscape. And I know there are some retirements coming up. So what's the plan to fill those positions?
So one of our best plans are venues like this, is to get the word out to people about how good our job and our career is, and exactly what you can do in order to become part of our agency. You are right, Katie, right now, we do have some vacancies in the Warden Service, and this is a good time to, if you're interested in becoming a game warden, to look into that. We have 14 vacancies in our field staff right now, which may not sound like a lot, but we only have 90 district game wardens. So that's a fairly high percentage of field people who aren't, whose districts are vacant. A couple of those are due to military obligations, and they'll be back, but a dozen of those are not. And it's nothing more than just our cyclic retirements that come into play. As state law enforcement officers, we have a straight 25-year retirement. About 25 years ago, we had a couple very large classes come through with 14 to 15 game wardens in each. So here we find ourselves 25 years later with a lot of retirements, either pertinent or available right now, or going to be in the upcoming year or so. So that's going to be one of my real big challenges over the next 3 to 5 years is we're going to have folks who are meeting retirement age, and we need to hire additional people. One of the real challenges around that is 25 years ago, our application process usually led to about 1,000 to 1,200 applicants a year. Now, if we get 50 to 75, that's about our average. That's not a reflection just on the Maine Warden Service. That's a phenomenon in law enforcement nationwide. Numbers of applicants are low, and we're all kind of competing with the same pool of people. Some of the things we did to combat that is we do some aggressive recruiting, both in-state and out-of-state. These virtual meetings and being able to get our message out through a variety of platforms now through our I&E division helps us out greatly. Of course, the show Northwood's Law didn't hurt our popularity at all either. So we still try to reflect on the younger generation that really took to that series is now getting to be of the age where they could be Maine game wardens. We hope we get a little boost from that. As far as the physical operations of our hiring process in the past, we had an opening date and we had a closing date when we took applications. And if you missed those dates, you sometimes had to wait a year before you could be submit your application. We've stopped doing that now. We now have what we call an open application process. So at any time you can go to our website and submit an application to be a game warden. That being said, we're always looking for it's not an easy job to get into. It's a very difficult hiring process. We need dedicated, compassionate, good decision-making folks who are community-oriented and really self-motivated. We patrol over a little over 600 miles of remote border between us and Canada, and we operate on a model of what I refer to as remote supervision. Myself or one of my supervisors isn't looking over the shoulder of a game warden day to day as they do their work, and we really rely on our staff to go out and know what their job function is for the day and accomplish that function on their own without really being told what to do. And that's easy at noon on a May afternoon, but on a night like last night to know that you need to get yourself up and maybe get out of bed and go work some snowmobile patrol at 10 o'clock at night when it's 4 degrees below zero out. It takes a dedicated individual who's really motivated to go out and do that kind of work. So that's why our hiring process is very extensive and quite frankly, fairly difficult to get through.
Thank you. And so if someone is interested in becoming a game warden, what are some of the steps they should take? We do have a lot of questions coming in about what courses they should take and what are some of those next steps for them?
Sure. People ask us that quite a bit, especially about their kids or college students or teenagers or themselves. And my first response is typically to try to get people to develop their interpersonal skills. We manage people, not wildlife. Folks think that every day we go out and we deal with and we handle wildlife. We do our fair share of that. We have our Bureau of Resource Management that does that as well. But we are full-time law enforcement officers and we really manage people. So we look for people with good communication skills, community-oriented, good decision makers. They need to have a diverse background in all the different activities we regulate, which is very extensive, from boating and canoeing, kayaking, to hunting and fishing. You get into some of the more subtle activities like trapping. There's not a lot of people that have a background in trapping anymore. You get into specialized areas like fly fishing or waterfowl identification. So you really need to have just a really good cross section of many outdoor activities and be enthusiastic about it. A good base knowledge around fish and wildlife habits and habitats is very helpful as well. We will train you in all those avenues as well, but you can be expected to be tested on them throughout our hiring process. So if you know that you're pretty weak in trapping or don't know anything about it at all, or fairly weak in waterfowl identification, you just need to study up on that and take some courses and do some work online to improve your skills around that. And then once you are hired, we'll teach you much more about all those topics and basically make you an expert in those fields. Additionally, you need to have a clean background. We go to the same basic law enforcement training program as all municipal officers, county, and state. We all go to the same training. The standards to get into the Maine Criminal Justice Academy are high, so you need to make sure you have a clean criminal background, and we do a very extensive multi-week background investigation on all of our staff. Understand the laws that we regulate, and the best way to kind of get a summary of what I just did is go to our website, maingamewarden.com. And probably one of the best ways to get good information off of that is there's a box there you can click on. I want to speak to a recruiter, and we have individual game wardens who will respond to you, and whoever it is who's looking to learn more about the hiring process can interact with them and ask questions face to face and kind of get an overview of what the expectation is. One other thing I'll touch on real quick, Katie, is because it is extensive, but it is important. Not only is our hiring process about 4 weeks long, but you'll also, the training you get is very, very extensive. Like I mentioned, you go to an 18-week law enforcement training program here at the Academy. That's where you get your law enforcement certification. It's basically your license to practice law enforcement in the state of Maine, similar to all other law enforcement officers here. That's about a little more than 700 hours of training. And that's where you learn criminal procedure, search and seizure, constitutional law, firearms, emergency vehicle operation, first aid, et cetera. Following that, rather than put you right into the field, we now have to train you to be a Maine Game Warden. So we have a 14-week advanced warden school, which follows that. And that's where you learn search and rescue procedures, Warden Service policy, Title 12 law, how to operate a boat, an ATV or a snowmobile, or investigate hunting-related shooting incidents. So from the day you apply, if you're a successful candidate, to the day you actually are out in the field is about a year's time. And during the course of that year, at the end, you also go through a fairly extensive field training officer program. But it's important to us to have well-trained staff. Like I said, we work in very extreme environments, and most of the time our staff is alone and quite some distance from any type of assistance or backup. So we need to make sure we have the best trained law enforcement officers on the landscape. And I do think we have that here in the state of Maine. Our curriculum also focuses on many other issues around managing people, like folks who are in crisis, cultural diversity training, interpersonal skills, implicit bias training, and a lot of those buzzwords that you're hearing in the news now, including critical incident stress management and employee and self wellness due to the cumulative effects of stress on law enforcement officers.
And Dan, before I jump into the next question, I do see a lot of comments coming in. What type of degree is required for someone to become a game warden? Do they need to have a college degree?
Okay, so they do not. You need to be 21 years of age and have a high school diploma. Or if you're 20, you need to have 60 credit hours towards some type of a college degree. I will say that most of the staff that we hire now do typically have some kind of either post-secondary education degree or some military experience. Our hiring process does test basic skills, as well as we do have a writing prompt. There's so much writing that we do now, whether it's case reports or investigations or communications with attorneys and attorney generals and different staff and our partners. We actually, part of our hiring process is a writing prompt. About 10 years ago, we partnered with the Department of Education on that, and you will be asked to write an essay, which is then scored by teachers from DOE. And that does eliminate some folks from our process, because in today's world, you do need to be able to move your way around on a computer and write efficiently. But the basic requirement is no degree at this point, no.
All right, so moving on, there's so many young people in the comments right now who are excited about becoming game wardens. It's obviously their dream job, and I know for many people it's a dream job. So what is rewarding about being a game warden? What are some of your favorite things?
So we get to work where everybody else recreates. I mean, people come up here, this is vacation land. People come here from all over the country, from all over the world to recreate in Maine, to go kayaking, canoeing, hunting, fishing. That's where our staff works every day. So that's a good thing, and it's very diverse. And if you have a short attention span, like we say, wait a minute, or wait a month, and the season changes, and our job expectations change with the seasons. It's a very hands-on job. It's not necessarily extremely physical, like exhausting, but you're out, you're walking, you're loading canoes, you're paddling, you're dealing in person with boaters and hunters and fishermen. And quite frankly, what makes it good is we get to interact with some of the best people on the landscape. Sportsmen and women who are engaged in those activities typically tend to be some of the best people to interact with, the best attitudes. We inspect more than 110,000 people every year as game wardens, whether it's boaters or hunters or fishermen, licenses, registrations. We respond to a little bit more than 25,000 calls for service, where somebody physically calls up and asks for the assistance of a game warden. More than 400 of those every year are search and rescue calls. So a little bit of quick math is we do more than one search and rescue call every day. Obviously, some days we don't have any, but other days we have 4 or 5. So we just get to be out and amongst people that enjoy doing the same things that we all enjoy doing. And in 99.5% of those interactions, they're positive interactions with folks who are out enjoying the outdoors and the great state of Maine. On top of that, professionally, we offer some of the top training in the country right here in the state of Maine, not just for the Warden Service, but for all law enforcement officers. Continuing education or professional development. Here in the Warden Service, we have a number of very competent specialty teams. Many of you are familiar with our canine team. The canine team, they're a group of folks who are very skilled in, cadaver detection, search and rescue, evidence detection. You can get into our dive team. We have a very competent, nationally renowned dive team that we put folks in the water because part of our mission is to recover, unfortunately, drowned victims off of the bottom of our lakes and ponds. But additionally, that team also has some of the highest tech equipment available today as remote underwater vehicles that we use, as also side scan sonar. We have evidence response teams, basically the CSI of the Warden Service, forensic mapping, high-tech surveying equipment that we use to map crime scenes and crash scenes. You can be a training officer. If you're into education and training of folks, you can get involved with the Maine Criminal Justice Academy, firearms training. So there's just this huge, broad avenue to improve yourself professionally, other than just being a game warden day to day, which is great as well. And finally, as I also would be remiss if I didn't mention some of the partners that we work with, volunteers and folks who are involved with our community, from Operation Game Thief, the Maine Professional Guides Association, Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine, Maine Trappers. We have professional relationships with all of these user groups that we interact with regularly and speak at the fish and game clubs. And it's just in general, very positive experiences all the time.
I love that. So I'll just remind everyone, if you have a question that we haven't gotten to yet, be sure to type it in the chat. We will be getting those towards the end of this conversation. Dan, game wardens love spending time outside, and if someone's interested in becoming a game warden, I think they have to love to be outside. If someone is interested in learning more about the outdoors, hunting, fishing, and any other activity that's, takes place outside, what are some options for them?
So younger folks, there's a lot of camps out there. There's things like Camp Northwoods or Warden camps through some of our partners like Bryant Pond or Teens to Trails. Get involved with scouting or even school programs like archery in the schools. As you get a little bit older into college age folks or adults, there's mentoring programs available. Again, a lot of those partners that I talked about get involved with local community groups, special interest groups like the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine or Maine Trappers Association, Maine Bound, anything that gets you out and interacting in the environment. We, as an agency, sponsor a lot of next step programs where you can go out and learn about gun handling. We're still developing some about, maybe how to track and dress off a deer, how to do some outdoor survival or navigation skills. Becoming an outdoors woman, there's a lot of opportunity out there now to go out and interact with our department or other summer camps and other professional organizations to get your feet under you and learn more about the outdoors. On the non-user side, things like Maine Audubon or bird watching, or just there's a number of outdoor groups in most communities now and online that can help get you exposed to many of the activities that we regulate.
Thank you so much. So let's see here. And I'll just, the final question before maybe we can jump over to what some people are asking, and what are some of the ways that you and your family like spending time outside?
Sure. So we're engaged in everything that I typically regulate. And one of the challenges today, and I'll put it out there because everybody out there, I'm sure, is experiencing it. So, we're pushing our kids constantly to get involved in the outdoors and to go out and canoe or kayak or fish or trap or hunt. We do all those activities all year long as we can legally, even as cold as tonight will be. We'll be out doing some things. As parents, my wife and I, one thing that we do still struggle with, like anybody else out there, is it's a full-time job to push, our young folks away from those phones and social media and everything else. It's 100% of the time I'm pushing my kids to go outdoors and get involved in whatever they can and kind of experience that rejuvenating effect of the outdoors. But we have a couple canvas wall tents, Western style wall tents. We try to go and explore someplace new a couple times a year. Typically, we spend a lot of time in the North Maine woods. We do some camping. Not everything is consumptive use for us. We'll do cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, just a lot of different activities. We do have a private wood lot. I myself am a private wood lot owner. And I actually even have a discontinued town road that goes through the middle of it. For those of you who are private landowners, understand and appreciate that comment. We do try to remind our kids and folks while they're out there recreating on the landscape that you probably are going to be recreating on somebody else's property, and just keep that in mind, whether you're skiing or you're snowshoeing or camping or what have you. But, we spend a lot of time out there on our woodlot doing habitat management, food plots, silviculture, cutting wood, and just trying to push ourselves outdoors and away from smartphones as much as we can.
Great. Thank you, Dan. So there's a lot of questions coming in. A lot of people want to become game wardens, which I'm really excited about. That's great to see. But of course, not everyone who's interested in becoming a game warden does end up wearing the green uniform. So what are some ways the public can help support game wardens' mission?
Well, really, we're a fairly small number of staff. Like I said, we're 123 sworn altogether. And we cover the entire state of Maine, 17 million acres. And, that's a lot of that is off-road, a lot of that's on-road. So we can't be everywhere at once. And, we are normal people like everybody else. We have days off, we have schedules that we work under, we have contracts. We have folks who were affected by COVID and kids who are home from school. And so we're managing all the life challenges that everybody else is. And so we really can't be every place at once. And in the last, 12 to 15 years, the opportunities for people in the outdoors have just skyrocketed. Since I became a game warden 24 years ago, we have year-round fishing now. We have spring and fall turkey hunting. We have deer seasons that start as early as September and go through December. We have multiple moose seasons and bear seasons and hunting seasons that overlap with fishing. So our staff cannot be everywhere at one time, and there's things going on all over the place. So really the best way to hold people accountable and regulate fish and wildlife crime and help conserve our fish and wildlife species is the public. The eyes of the public and or the influence that the public has on their neighbors and their friends and the people that they hunt and fish with, to help us with our mission as far as for conservation of fish and wildlife and enforcing the law, is just to not approve of people violating fish and game laws. And if you know something, to reach out and report it. We have a nonprofit Operation Game Thief out there where you can actually make anonymous calls and reports about fish and game illegal activity that you know about. And really, that's just our way to try to get the public to become involved with helping preserve our limited natural resources, because our staff can't do it all at once, and everybody out there knows of some illegal behavior that's going on. In addition to that, just continue to promote all the activities that we're involved with. We do regulate some activities that our funding sources are such that we need to try to make a balance between snowmobiling and ATVing. There's a lot of activities that we assist in, nuisance wildlife control and search and rescue and so forth, that any type of help that we can get around that, whether it's education and people helping themselves via websites and our website, anything that you can do to take some of the pressures off game wardens. Like I said, we respond to over 26,000 complaints a year and spend a lot of our time inspecting our user groups to try to make sure everybody's safe out there, but we can't do it on our own.
So we do have a couple more questions coming in. What do game wardens do ride-alongs? I'm sure with COVID there are some rules with regard to that.
Sure, we have a policy around that, and we do ride-alongs with folks who are over 18 years of age, just for liability reasons, really. Right now, we're not doing any because of the pandemic and social distancing and mask wear and so forth. But once that clears up, it is fairly common for us to do ride-alongs. If you do have a younger person that wants to do a so-called ride-along, it may not be a general patrol type ride-along, but we can do things like have them accompany us to a sportsman show so they can see our staff interacting with the general public and the kind of questions that we get. Accompany us to a fishing game club when we're doing a speaking engagement. We've taken people to the Maine Criminal Justice Academy graduation so they can see all those law enforcement officers getting their certificate. So, and we very often will gladly come and speak to school groups or user groups, some fishing game clubs, or even come to your house and speak one-on-one with your student or young person. But once somebody is 18 years of age, we do patrol type ride-alongs, whether it's vehicle patrol or boat patrol are sometimes popular. But for right now, they're suspended due to the pandemic. The best way to find out about them once we're back up on track and kind of back to normal, whatever that is we have 5 divisions across the state, 5 regional headquarters in Gray, Sydney, Bangor, Greenville, and Ashland, and to reach out to our support staff and our field lieutenants at those locations, and they can work with you on organizing a ride along with the local game warden.
So Dan, on the other side of things a little bit, What should, if someone is a hunter or angler just out and about and they run into a game warden, what should they expect from that experience?
So, like I said, we inspect about 110,000 people a year. We are full-time state law enforcement, and not everybody we run into is glad to see us. So you're going to see us approach you professionally and courteously, but we also expect the same in return. In many, many situations, the people who we are approaching, it's not as much of a controlled environment as if we're stopping a vehicle on the side of the road. A lot of times we're both on foot. Many of the people that we inspect have weapons with them, whether it be knives or guns, and that's expected because they're engaged in hunting and fishing and various activities. But the game warden will initially approach you courteously. They'll introduce themselves, but follow their directions. If they tell you to set your firearm down, you should set your firearm down. Don't necessarily start to unload it. Don't swing it around. We get swept by a lot of muzzles during the course of the year, and that's disturbing to us. Sometimes it's just people getting nervous when they're being approached by a law enforcement officer. But we try to keep people as calm and as comfortable as we can. But you never know why we're approaching you. Most of the time, it's for a basic inspection of a hunting or fishing license, but we may also have just received a call where we're looking for somebody. There was a suspicious person in the area, and we don't know who somebody is at this point. Likewise, now more than ever, our staff are encountering folks who are using illegal or illicit drugs, or they may be high on some type of a substance. And so, we are going to practice the standard officer safety practices that we're trained to, and you will see us, posture ourselves in such a way that our staff's own safety is our number one priority. If you're on a recreational type vehicle, we very often will, if we can see your registration, we may wave you on. But there are also obligations for folks who are out recreating in boats and on ATVs and snowmobiles to stop if we so motion for you to, so we can inspect your certificate. So don't be surprised if a game warden motions for you to stop, even if you're displaying your registration certificate, because we need to even if you're displaying your registration sticker, because we may need to inspect your certificate or speak with you about something else. So the best thing is just to stop, follow the directions, shut off your machine so we can speak with you. And in some cases we'll move you along. In other places we'll perform a safety inspection.
So we do have some more questions about the process about becoming a game warden. So I just want to ask, are there any gender or age restrictions for becoming a game warden?
No, the only age restriction, as I said, is 21 years of age and a high school diploma. Or if you're 20, you need to have 60 credit hours to a post-secondary education. But otherwise, no, we don't. We actually encourage folks of all ages to apply. We absolutely encourage all genders to apply as well. We do have a few ladies on our force right now, but we could always use more. We have a few in our hiring process as we speak. The process, I'll just touch on it a little bit, is about a 9-step process. After you submit your application, there is a written kind of a general knowledge test where you'll be tested on fish and wildlife habitats and things that we regulate, like ATV and snowmobile, parts of them, or parts of a boat, or waterfowl identification, or basics of trapping and hunting and firearms. We don't get too much into the laws. Some people will study up a lot on laws, and we're going to teach you the laws. We want to measure your basic knowledge about the activities we regulate. After that, you'll have to do the writing prompt that I spoke about, where you'll be expected to write an essay in a short period of time so we can measure your writing ability, and then go through a fairly extensive oral board with a number of game wardens where we test your, it's basically a job interview, a job panel. After that, you go through a very extensive background check, which takes several weeks, where we dig deeply into your background to see what your criminal history is, and not only your criminal history, but your criminal conduct, stuff that you were not necessarily caught or convicted of. If you successfully get through that, we then have a polygraph test where we check to see if you were truthful about your background, and then a psychological exam. and then as well as a swim test. We do a fairly significant swim test because in the environment that we work, it's not uncommon for a game warden to end up in the water or potentially end up in the water, sometimes in cold times of year, or even in warm times of year. So we do all that. And if you successfully get through all that process, then you're offered a job and you go to the Maine Criminal Justice Academy to start your 18-week program.
We only have quite a bit of time left. And so I'm going to ask a question about whether or not wardens patrol the coastline. That question came in a little earlier.
So our mission is inland fisheries and wildlife. So when you say the coastline, our primary mission isn't tidal water. We have a sister agency called Maine Marine Patrol that does the tidal water. However, where there is inland hunting right up along the coastline, and there are lakes and ponds along the coastline, as well as recreational vehicle activity, as well as offshore islands where a lot of hunting and fishing and recreational activities take place, you will find game wardens on the coast. There are game wardens assigned to the coast, and we have boats, and you'll even find us out on tidal water because we need to go out and patrol the offshore islands. As well, we also enforce the Migratory Bird Treaty Act with waterfowl hunting, and obviously sea duck hunting takes place along the coast. So game wardens do patrol on the coast. As far as fish that occur in tidal waters, our sister agency does that, Maine Marine Patrol. However, our missions, other than the species that we support and regulate, are very, very similar. We go to very similar training as they do. So our staff often work very closely together. We support them with their mission when they have busy times, like when particular fish or elver season or fish are running. And likewise, Maine Marine Patrol, even though their main mission is on the coast, if we need assistance in our coastal towns, we regularly get assisted by our Marine Patrol partners.
Thank you, Dan. So I have a question. What do you think is the most important thing about people getting outside?
Well, I think this year was just a good example of that. I mean, in Maine, we have short days. It's cold in the wintertime. I mean, there's no question that many people are affected by seasonal affective disorder. You get up and you go to work in the dark, and you come home in the dark. It's cold weather. There's a lot of stresses on folks in this part of the country that aren't in other parts of the country. And really, the reason I got involved with this job and everything I do is I really think that the outdoors have a real rejuvenating, refreshing effect. And, you don't have to like days like today where it's 4 below zero out, but if you prepare for it and you dress for it, you can have the same rejuvenating effect on a day like today as you can on a nice day in May, June, or July. So I think it's important that people get out and they appreciate their natural resources. Keep in mind that there are tens of thousands of people across the country and really across the world that don't live in Maine, but yet they look forward 51 weeks a year to be able to come here for their vacation. Whether it's leaf peeping in October or it's hunting season to come up for their week of hunting. I know there's numerous people from away on this call right now that come up for a week or two of the year during hunting season. And I promise that for 50 weeks a year, that's all they think about. They're dealing with their jobs and the hecticness of their life. And they're thinking, geez, I just can't wait till I get to go recreate in Maine. Those of us who live here and work in this environment, it's right outside our back door. I mean, most of us can walk outside and be right in it, or within a 10-minute drive, be to one of our wildlife management areas, some of our public lands, to get out and enjoy that which, people spend, millions of dollars and travel millions of miles every year to come here and enjoy. And it's right here in our backyard. And if you need direction on how to enjoy it, our agency and other agencies like ours really try to push out messaging of how to do that. You don't need to go to the North Maine woods, and you don't need to go up north of Moosehead Lake to do so. There's plenty of opportunities in state and public land right in and around some of our population areas. There's a number of state parks and land that we own, and land land trust groups out there that allow public use of their land. And most of them have social media sites that you can get on and learn how to get out and recreate and understand the refreshing aspects of being outside.
That was a really great answer. It's definitely wonderful living here in vacation land, and I definitely echo everything that you're saying. I can't wait to go outside for a quick walk later today, even though I'm going to be bundled up. I'm always cold, so everyone in the office knows that. Dan, do you have any final thoughts for us, just from your perspective, or anything you want the public to know?
I guess my final thought in the position I'm in now, I mean, I laugh. People say I'm barely a game warden because, I'm an administrator now. I sit at a desk most of the time. That's why I do recreate a lot on my time off. I'll just let people remember that we are a small bureau, and as IFW, we're a small agency, but we have some of the most dedicated staff. One of the missions that I have as colonel is to keep people, remind people that Maine Game Wardens and folks across the aisle, our biologists and fisheries and wildlife biologists are doing things every day that are really quite unique and are supporting the people of the state of Maine. Maine Game Wardens literally impact people's lives every day. They save lives, they change people's lives. Of those 400 and some search and rescue missions, some of the terrible crashes that we deal with. One of the best things about my job now is very often as law enforcement officers, we deal with people when they're at their lowest, they're having the worst day of their life. And our game wardens have the ability to make that a little bit better. And probably weekly or a couple times a month, I'll get a letter from somebody who says, your game warden made a difference during a very hard time for us. And so that's what I have to look forward to now. I want people to just remember that our staff, I'm sure some of them are out there and are watching. They perform acts every day that we don't hear about. Many times I don't hear about them. Last night it was cold out. They go out and they perform rescues and help people out, and acts that would typically be extraordinary, they have become so routine that we take them for granted. And so one of my missions with myself and my command staff is to make sure that that's not forgotten, and the people of the state of Maine should remember that.
No, Dan, I don't want to end when we have still a few minutes left here. When we practice this, we definitely went over the hour. So we tightened up our answers a little. And I want to ask, maybe, do you have any, people in your life who really helped you get to this point, some role models or mentors that sort of shaped who you are now?
Sure. We almost got through the whole hour without me mentioning it, but so I'm from away. And so I was one of those people that look forward to coming to Maine every year. And I came up here to go to school. And I have Maine Game Wardens that I remember checking me and inspecting me when I was up here bear hunting when I was 12 or 14 years old. They made impressions on me. I come from a law enforcement family. My dad was a state police officer in another state. And all those things tend to have an influence on you and kind of pushed me up here. But I do remember, and our staff, if you ask any Maine Game Warden, they'll typically tell you, remembering when they were checked by their first game warden, or what that first influence was by some law enforcement officer, be it a game warden or a state trooper or county or municipal officer, that had some effect on them, that wanted to push them into a career of serving people and trying to help people. So sure, I have a lot of people that have affected me, and some of them, interestingly enough, still work for me. So.
Well, that's great. So I think that we are kind of at the end of our conversation today. I don't think we really have too much time to take any more questions. And I just want to end on this note and wrap up. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I think this has been a really great conversation. I hope to have the Colonel on with us again for this coffee chat. I will continue this series next month. I'll be speaking with fisheries staff next month and kind of talking about some of the things that they're working on. And I want to thank Dan for joining me today. I think it's been a really excellent conversation, and I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome, Katie, and everybody out there. Just go out and enjoy yourself. It's going to be a cold weekend, but be safe. Tell somebody where you're going and dress warm, and you can enjoy yourself just as much when it's 5 below as when it's 50 degrees out with proper planning. So I thank everybody for chiming in, and I'm sure I'll see you again in this virtual world. Thank you.
And hopefully in person at some point.
Right.
And I will remind everybody watching that this is recorded. So if you want to share it with friends or family, you absolutely can do that. Thank you, and everyone have a great day.